The stagecoach wheels ground to a halt in a cloud of red dust, and Sarah Mitchell felt her stomach lurch one final time. Through the grimy window, she glimpsed her new world, endless prairie stretching toward purple mountains, dotted with scrub brush and the occasional mesquite tree. The Texas frontier looked nothing like the green hills of Ohio she'd left behind 3 weeks ago. "End of the line, miss," the driver called down, his weathered face kind but hurried. "Tom Brennan's place is just up that ridge there." Sarah smoothed her best traveling dress, navy blue wool that had seemed practical back east, but now felt suffocating in the desert heat. Her hands trembled as she gathered her single carpet bag and the small wooden trunk containing everything she owned. At 22, she was embarking on the greatest gamble of her life, marrying a man she'd never met, based on 3 letters and a tintype photograph. The ranch house materialized as she crested the hill, a modest adobe structure with a wide porch, surrounded by a few outbuildings and a corral holding half a dozen horses. Smoke curled from the chimney, and Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Somewhere inside was Thomas Brennan, the widowed cattle rancher who'd answered her advertisement in the matrimonial section of the Galveston Daily News. Before she could lose her nerve, the front door opened. Tom Brennan stepped onto the porch, and Sarah was relieved to see he looked much like his photograph, tall and broad-shouldered, with graying brown hair and eyes the color of winter sky. His face was deeply lined from years of sun and wind, but his expression was gentle as he removed his hat. "Miss Mitchell, I presume?" His voice carried a slight Irish accent. "Welcome to the Broken Arrow Ranch." "Mr. Brennan," Sarah attempted a curtsy, feeling foolish. "Thank you for having me." An awkward silence stretched between them before Tom cleared his throat. "Please call me Tom. We'll be married come Sunday, after all." He gestured toward the house. "Let me show you where you'll be staying until then. I've prepared the spare room." The interior was spartanly furnished but clean. Tom had clearly made an effort. Wildflowers sat in a mason jar on the kitchen table, and the floors had been recently swept. Sarah noticed a woman's touches here and there: embroidered curtains, a rocking chair by the fireplace, a daguerreotype of a lovely woman with kind eyes. "My late wife Elena," Tom said quietly, following her gaze. "She passed 2 years ago. Fever took her." His voice carried old pain. "I suppose you're wondering why a man my age seeks a mail-order bride instead of courting locally." Sarah set down her bag carefully. "I imagine you have your reasons, just as I have mine." Tom studied her face. "You wrote that you were seeking a fresh start. Might I ask from what?" Heat crept up Sarah's neck. She'd been deliberately vague in her letters, mentioning only that she was orphaned and seeking opportunity in the West. The truth was more complicated and more shameful. Her uncle had sold the family farm to pay his gambling debts, leaving her homeless and nearly penniless. The final humiliation had come when he'd tried to arrange a marriage between her and his creditor, a brutish man twice her age, who'd made his intentions clear during their first meeting. "My uncle lost our farm," she said finally. "I had little choice but to seek my fortune elsewhere." Tom nodded slowly. "The frontier's full of folks running from something. What matters is what you make of your new start." He moved toward the kitchen. "Are you hungry? I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage beans and cornbread." Over a simple meal, they began the delicate dance of getting acquainted. Tom told her about the ranch. He ran about 200 head of cattle over 1,000 acres, with help from 2 Mexican vaqueros who lived in the bunkhouse. The nearest town, Cedar Falls, was a hard day's ride south. Their closest neighbors were the Morrison family, 10 miles east, and old Doc Patterson, who'd homesteaded a small spread to the west. "It gets mighty lonely out here," Tom admitted, refilling her coffee cup. "Eleanor used to say the silence could drive a person to madness if you let it. I expect that's part of why you answered my advertisement. The isolation doesn't suit everyone." Sarah considered this. In Ohio, she'd been surrounded by people, but had felt utterly alone after her parents died. "I think I prefer honest solitude to pretending to belong where you don't." Something shifted in Tom's expression. "That's a wise observation." He studied her face in the lamplight. "I won't pretend this marriage is about love, Sarah. We're both practical people seeking companionship and partnership, but I promise to treat you with respect and provide for you to the best of my ability." "And I promise to be a good wife and partner," Sarah replied formally, though her heart ached a little. She'd dreamed of love once, but those dreams seemed childish now. As evening settled over the ranch, Tom showed her to the spare room and bid her good night. Alone, Sarah unpacked her few belongings and tried to calm her nerves. Outside, coyotes began their nightly serenade, a sound both beautiful and unsettling. She'd read about the dangers of frontier life, Indian raids, bandits, natural disasters, but sitting in this quiet house, such threats seemed distant. She was wrong. 3 days later, as she was learning to manage the household and getting acquainted with Tom's quiet ways, everything would change. A wounded child would stumble into their lives, followed by violence that would test every ounce of courage she possessed. But tonight Sarah Mitchell simply knelt by her narrow bed and prayed for the strength to build a new life in this harsh and beautiful land. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was the distant drumming of hoofbeats, fading into the endless Texas night. 3 days after her arrival, Sarah was beginning to find her rhythm at the Broken Arrow Ranch. Tom had proven to be a considerate, if reserved, companion, and she'd thrown herself into learning the countless tasks required to maintain a frontier household. She'd burned her first 2 attempts at cornbread, but the third had earned a nod of approval from Tom, which felt like a small victory. The morning of the 4th day dawned clear and cold. October in this part of Texas brought dramatic temperature swings, blazing hot afternoons followed by nights that could frost water barrels. Sarah was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard the sound that would change everything, a soft whimpering coming from the direction of the barn. At first, she thought it might be an injured animal. Tom and his vaqueros, Diego and Carlos, had ridden out before dawn to check the north pasture, where several steers had gone missing. Sarah was alone on the ranch, something that hadn't bothered her until now. The whimpering came again, definitely human and full of pain. Sarah dropped the wet shirt she'd been hanging and walked cautiously toward the barn. The heavy wooden doors stood slightly ajar, and she could see nothing in the dim interior. Her heart pounded as she pushed the door wider. "Hello?" she called softly. "Is someone there?" A rustling sound came from the back corner, near the feed bins. Sarah grabbed a pitchfork from beside the door and crept forward, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. What she saw made her gasp and drop the weapon. Huddled behind a pile of hay bales was a boy, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. His clothing immediately marked him as Comanche, buckskin leggings and a small shirt decorated with beadwork. But it was his condition that made Sarah's heart clench. A crude bandage, dark with dried blood, was wrapped around his left shoulder. His face was pale beneath its natural copper tone, and his dark eyes were fever-bright with pain and fear. For a moment they stared at each other across the space that separated their worlds. Sarah had heard the stories about Indians, raids, scalping, children stolen in the night, but looking at this wounded child, she saw only suffering. "You're hurt," she said gently, taking a step closer. The boy tensed, ready to bolt despite his obvious weakness. Sarah held up her hands to show they were empty. "I won't hurt you. Let me help." The boy spoke rapidly in his native language, his voice urgent and frightened. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. He was in danger and needed to hide. "What's your name?" she asked, slowly kneeling to put herself at his eye level. When he didn't respond, she pointed to herself. "Sarah." Then she pointed to him with a questioning look. After a long moment, the boy whispered, "Ayana." The word was barely audible, but Sarah heard the trust it represented. "Ayana," she repeated carefully. "That's a beautiful name." She pointed to his wounded shoulder and made a concerned face. "Hurt? Pain?" The boy nodded, tears beginning to track down his dusty cheeks. Sarah's maternal instincts, dormant since she'd helped raise her younger siblings back in Ohio, surged to life. This child needed medical attention, and he needed it now. "Come," she said, gesturing toward the house. "Help you. Medicine." But Ayana shook his head violently and pointed toward the prairie, speaking urgently in Comanche. His meaning became clear when Sarah heard what he'd already detected, the distant sound of hoofbeats approaching fast. Fear shot through her as she recognized the harsh voices carrying on the wind. These weren't Tom and his vaqueros returning. The language was crude English, peppered with curses, and it was getting closer. "Where's the little rat?" one voice shouted. "Track leads straight this way." "Should have killed him when we killed the rest," another replied with cold brutality. "Boss wants no witnesses to what happened at Yellow Creek." Sarah's blood turned to ice. These men, bandits from the sound of them, had attacked Ayana's people and were hunting him to silence him permanently. The boy's eyes met hers, and she saw he understood the danger too. Without thinking, Sarah scooped up the injured child and carried him deeper into the barn. She found a space between stacked feed sacks and gently pushed him down. "Hide," she whispered urgently. "Stay quiet." Ayana gripped her wrist with surprising strength for someone so wounded. His eyes were wide with fear. Not for himself, she realized, but for her. He'd already seen what these men were capable of. "I'll be fine," Sarah lied, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Stay hidden no matter what happens." She smoothed down her skirt and walked out of the barn as casually as she could manage. 5 riders were approaching the ranch house, and even from a distance she could see they were trouble. Their clothes were trail-worn and dirty, their faces hard and unshaven. Each man wore a gun belt, and their horses were lathered with sweat as if they'd been riding hard for hours. The leader, a tall man with a black beard and cruel eyes, dismounted near the porch. "Morning, ma'am," he said with mock politeness that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Name's Jake Morrison. We're tracking a wounded Indian boy who might have come through here. Dangerous little savage. We need to take him back to where he belongs." Sarah forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "I haven't seen any children, Indian or otherwise. My husband and his men are out checking cattle, but I'm sure they'd have mentioned something if they'd seen tracks." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Your husband, you say? Where might he be?" "The north pasture," Sarah replied, silently praying Tom wouldn't choose this moment to return. "He'll be back by midday." One of the other men, younger with sandy hair and shifty eyes, spoke up. "Boss, that boy was bleeding pretty good. If he came this way, he'd be looking for shelter. Mind if we check your outbuildings?" Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm afraid I can't allow strangers to search our property without my husband's permission. You understand?" Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Well now, that's not very neighborly. See, this boy's a killer. Murdered 3 good men in their sleep. We're doing our civic duty tracking him down." Sarah knew he was lying. Whatever had happened, this wounded child wasn't the aggressor, but she also knew arguing would only make things worse. "Perhaps you could wait for my husband to return," she suggested. "He'd be better able to help you with your search." "I don't think so," Morrison said, his false politeness dropping away entirely. "Boys, check the barn and outbuildings. If that little snake's here, we'll find him." As the men dismounted and spread out, Sarah realized she was about to face the greatest test of her life. In the barn was a wounded child who depended on her protection. Between them and safety stood 5 armed men who wouldn't hesitate to kill them both. Sarah Mitchell had come west, seeking a new life. She was about to discover what that life was truly worth. Sarah watched in growing terror as the 5 bandits spread out across the ranch yard. Morrison kept his cold eyes fixed on her, while his men moved toward the barn where Ayana lay hidden. Her mind raced, calculating distances and options. Tom's rifle hung above the mantelpiece inside the house, but she'd never fired a gun in her life. Still, it might be her only chance. "You know," Morrison said conversationally, stepping closer to the porch, "I'm getting the feeling you're not being entirely truthful with us, Mom. That boy left quite a blood trail and it leads right to your barn." Before Sarah could respond, Sandy Hare emerged from the barn. "Found signs, boss. Fresh blood on the hay and there's a spot where someone's been hiding." He held up a small piece of beaded leather. "This came off Indian clothing." Sarah's heart sank, but she forced herself to remain calm. "That could be from anything. We trade with peaceful tribes sometimes for horses and supplies." Morrison's laugh was ugly. "Lady, you're either the worst liar I've ever met or you're harboring a fugitive. Either way, I'm losing patience." He signaled to his men. "Tear this place apart. Find that boy." It was now or never. Sarah stepped backward toward the door. "I need to get something from inside for you," she said. "Just a moment." She slipped through the door and immediately grabbed Tom's Winchester from above the fireplace. Her hand shook as she checked the chamber. It was loaded, thank God. She'd watched Tom clean and load it several times, but knowing how something worked and actually doing it were different things entirely. Through the window she could see the bandits converging on the barn. In moments they'd find Ayana, and both she and the child would be dead. There was no time for fear, no time for doubt. Sarah pushed open the front door and raised the rifle. "Get away from my barn!" she shouted, her voice carrying across the yard with more authority than she felt. The bandits turned in surprise. Morrison's face split into a grin. Well, the little lady's got some teeth after all." He took a step forward. "Put that rifle down before you hurt yourself, darling. We both know you don't have the nerve to use it." Sarah aimed the barrel at Morrison's chest. Her hands were steadier now, her purpose clear. "I said get away from my barn. This is your only warning." "Boys," Morrison called without taking his eyes off Sarah, "continue the search. This little gal's just making noise." When Sandy Hair took another step toward the barn, Sarah pulled the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with surprising force, and the shot went wide, splintering wood near the bandit's feet. But the message was clear. Morrison's expression darkened. "That was a mistake, lady." "The next shot won't miss," Sarah lied, working the rifle's action the way she'd seen Tom do. "I'm a better shot than I let on." For a tense moment, the standoff held. Then one of the bandits, a heavy-set man with a grizzled beard, chuckled. "Jake, she's got sand. I'll give her that." "Maybe we should just ride on." "Nobody leaves until we get that boy," Morrison snarled. He saw too much at Yellow Creek. Can't have witnesses talking about what happened to those settlers. The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. These weren't just bandits tracking an escaped captive. They were murderers covering their tracks. The 3 good men Morrison claimed Ayanna had killed were probably innocent settlers, possibly the boy's own family. The child in her barn was likely the sole survivor of a massacre. "You're the killers," Sarah said, her voice ringing with disgust. "That child isn't your prisoner. He's your victim." Morrison's mask of civility finally dropped completely. Smart woman. Too smart. He drew his pistol. "Tell you what, hand over the boy and I'll make your death quick. Keep protecting him, and things will get unpleasant." Sarah's answer was another rifle shot, this one closer to Morrison's position. The bandit leader dove for cover behind a water trough, cursing. His men scattered, taking positions behind outbuildings and the corral fence. "Kill her," Morrison shouted. "Burn the barn if you have to, but find that boy." Gunfire erupted across the ranch yard. Sarah ducked back inside the house as bullets shattered windows and splintered the doorframe. She'd started something she couldn't finish. 5 armed men against 1 inexperienced woman with a single rifle. But there was no choice now except to fight. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Sarah moved from window to window, firing whenever she saw a target, trying to keep the bandits away from the barn. Her shots were wild and mostly ineffective, but they forced the men to keep their heads down. Then disaster struck. A bullet caught her in the left arm, spinning her around and sending the rifle clattering across the floor. Pain flared hot and immediate, and she could feel warm blood soaking through her sleeve. With her good arm, she retrieved the rifle and checked the chamber. 3 shots left. Outside, she could hear Morrison rallying his men. "She's hit! Now's our chance. Grady, take the barn, rest of you with me, we're going in the front." Footsteps pounded across the porch. Sarah positioned herself behind the overturned kitchen table and raised the rifle, fighting waves of dizziness from blood loss. The front door exploded inward, and Morrison charged through with 2 of his men. Sarah's first shot took down the man on Morrison's left, sending him crashing into the wall. Her second shot went wide as the recoil jarred her wounded arm. Morrison and the remaining bandit dove for cover. "1 shot left, lady," Morrison called out. "Then you're dead, and so's that Indian brat." Through the shattered window, Sarah could see Grady approaching the barn with a burning torch. In moments, he'd set fire to the building with Ayanna inside. She had 1 bullet and 2 targets, and even if she managed to kill Morrison, the others would finish her and find the boy. That's when she heard it, a sound that made her blood freeze and her heart soar simultaneously. From somewhere outside came the distinctive whistle of arrows cutting through air, followed by Grady's scream of pain and surprise. Morrison's head snapped up. "What the hell?" The whistle came again, and suddenly the ranch yard was full of movement. Dark figures materialized from the prairie grass like ghosts, moving with deadly silence. Comanche warriors, their faces painted for war, struck with swift and terrible precision. The remaining bandits outside didn't stand a chance. Arrows found their marks with lethal accuracy, and those who tried to run were cut down before they could reach their horses. In the house, Morrison and his companions stared out the windows in terror. "How many?" Morrison whispered. His companion's voice shook. "Dozens, maybe more. We're surrounded." Sarah used their distraction to reload the rifle with shells from Tom's ammunition box, though her wounded arm made the task clumsy and painful. Outside, she could see more warriors emerging from concealment, not dozens, but what looked like an entire war party. They moved with disciplined precision, cutting off every escape route. Morrison turned back to Sarah, his face wild with desperation. You did this. You somehow signaled them. I did nothing, Sarah said honestly. She was as surprised by the warrior's appearance as the bandits, though vastly more grateful. A new voice called from outside, deep, authoritative, speaking English with a slight accent. White woman, send out the men who hunt our child. Morrison grabbed his companion's arm. We're dead if we go out there. We're dead if we stay here too, the other man replied. Maybe we can make a deal. No deals, the voice outside continued. You killed families at Yellow Creek. You hunt wounded boy. Now you pay. Sarah realized the warriors must have been tracking the bandits just as the bandits had been tracking Ayana. The child's escape had led both hunter and hunted to her ranch, and now the circle was closing. Morrison looked at Sarah with hatred and calculation. Maybe we can't fight our way out, but we can take you with us. He raised his pistol toward her. Sarah's rifle boomed one final time. Morrison spun backward and hit the floor, his gun sliding across the room. His companion threw down his weapon and raised his hands. Don't shoot, I surrender. The voice outside called again. White woman, are you harmed? Sarah leaned against the window frame, suddenly exhausted. Blood loss and adrenaline were taking their toll, but she managed to call back. I'm wounded but alive. The boy, Ayana, he's safe in the barn. A moment later, the front door opened carefully. A tall Comanche warrior stepped inside, his eyes quickly assessing the scene. He was perhaps 40 years old, with the bearing of a leader and intelligent dark eyes that missed nothing. Behind him came two younger warriors who immediately secured the surviving bandit. I am Chief Standing Bear, the man said in careful English. You protected our son? Sarah nodded weakly. He was hurt. I couldn't let them... She swayed, and Standing Bear moved quickly to steady her. You have courage, white woman. Great courage. He examined her wounded arm with experienced eyes. This needs attention. He called something in Comanche, and one of the younger warriors disappeared outside. More voices could be heard from the barn, joyful voices speaking rapidly in the Comanche language. Ayana was being reunited with his people, and from the sounds of celebration he was going to be fine. Standing Bear helped Sarah to a chair and began examining her wound more carefully. The boy told us what you did, he said quietly. How you hid him, fought for him. This is not forgotten. Anyone would have done the same, Sarah said, though she wasn't sure that was true. The chief's eyes met hers. No, not anyone. You could have given him to the bad men to save yourself. Instead, you chose to fight, he paused. You chose to be family to one who had none. Outside, the celebration was growing louder. Sarah could hear Ayana's voice among the others, stronger now, telling his story to his rescuers, but she could also hear something else, the distant sound of hoofbeats approaching. Tom and his vaqueros were returning. Standing Bear heard it too. He looked at Sarah with something that might have been respect. Your husband returns. We will meet him in peace, but we will also watch to see what kind of man he is. As the Comanche warrior bound her wounded arm with gentle efficiency, Sarah realized her ordeal was just beginning. The real test would come when Tom arrived to find his bride wounded, his house shot full of holes, and a Comanche war party surrounding his ranch. But somehow, looking into Standing Bear's eyes, she felt a strange sense of hope. She'd passed one test today, the test of her own courage and character. Perhaps with luck and understanding on both sides, she could help pass another, the test of whether two peoples could find common ground in a harsh and unforgiving land. The sound of hoofbeats grew closer, and Sarah prepared to face whatever came next. Tom Brennan crested the ridge above his ranch and pulled his horse to an abrupt halt. His vaqueros, Diego and Carlos, flanked him on either side, their hands instinctively moving toward their weapons. The scene below defied belief. Comanche warriors surrounded the Broken Arrow Ranch, their horses standing in perfect formation, while smoke drifted from the chimney of his shot-up house. Madre de Dios, Carlos whispered, crossing himself. What happened here, Patron? Tom's eyes found what remained of 5 strange horses near the corral. 2 lay dead, the others had scattered. Bodies of unknown men were visible in the ranch yard. But it was the sight of Sarah sitting on his front porch, her arm in a makeshift sling while a Comanche chief knelt beside her, that made his heart stop. Easy, Tom said quietly to his men, though his own pulse was racing. Whatever happened here, my wife is alive. That's what matters. He touched his heels to his horse's flanks and rode slowly down the slope, his hands visible and empty. Chief Standing Bear rose as Tom approached, his bearing dignified but watchful. The other warriors remained mounted but relaxed, a sign that immediate danger had passed. Sarah struggled to her feet, and Tom could see the pain and exhaustion in her face. "Tom," she called out, her voice carrying both relief and apprehension. "I can explain everything." Tom dismounted carefully, his eyes never leaving Standing Bear's face. He'd dealt with Comanche before, trading encounters that could go either way depending on respect and understanding. This situation was far more delicate than any of those. "Chief," Tom said, nodding respectfully, "I am Thomas Brennan. This is my wife Sarah and my ranch." He gestured to indicate he claimed ownership, but not dominance. Standing Bear studied Tom for a long moment before responding. "I am Chief Standing Bear of the Comanche. Your woman showed great courage today. She protected one of our children when evil men would have killed him." "Ayana," Sarah added quickly. "He was wounded and hiding in our barn. These men, bandits, had murdered his family and were hunting him." She pointed to the bodies in the yard. "They threatened to burn him alive." Tom's face darkened as he took in the bullet holes in his house, the shattered windows, the blood on Sarah's sleeve. "You fought them alone?" "I had no choice," Sarah replied simply. "They would have killed him." Standing Bear spoke to one of the younger warriors, who dismounted and approached, leading a small figure. Ayana stepped forward, his shoulder properly bandaged now but his eyes bright with health and happiness. He said something in Comanche to Standing Bear, gesturing towards Sarah. "The boy says the white woman was like a mother bear protecting her cub," Standing Bear translated. "He says she fought like a warrior despite having no warrior's training." Ayana approached Sarah and said something in halting English. "Thank you, Mother Sarah." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She knelt carefully and touched the boy's face. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." Tom watched this exchange with growing understanding. His mail-order bride, the quiet woman who'd been too nervous to properly hold a coffee cup 3 days ago, had single-handedly held off 5 armed men to protect a Comanche child. The magnitude of her courage humbled him. "Chief Standing Bear," Tom said formally, "my wife did what any person of honor would do. But I understand this creates a debt between us." The chief's eyes showed approval at Tom's words. "Your woman has shown that not all whites are enemies of the people. This is unusual in our experience." Diego and Carlos had dismounted and were examining the scene with professional interest. "Patron," Diego called softly, "these men, they are known bandits, bad hombres who raid settlements and blame Indians. We have seen their work before." Standing Bear nodded grimly. "Yes, they killed 3 families at Yellow Creek, then came hunting the only witness." He placed a protective hand on Ayana's shoulder. "The boy escaped when they thought him dead. He crawled many miles to reach safety." "And found it here," Tom said, looking at Sarah with new eyes. "My wife gave him sanctuary." "More than sanctuary," Standing Bear corrected. "She gave him family. In our way, this creates bonds that do not break." The chief turned to address his warriors in Comanche. Several dismounted and began collecting the bodies of the bandits, preparing to dispose of them away from the ranch. Others tended to the horses, working with efficient cooperation. "There's something else," Standing Bear said to Tom. "Word of what your woman did will spread among the people. The Quahadi have long memories for both kindness and cruelty. Your ranch will be under our protection now." Tom felt the weight of this statement. Comanche protection was not given lightly, but it also meant responsibilities. "What does this mean for us practically?" "It means," Standing Bear replied, "that no one will raid your cattle or horses. It means travelers on the warpath will pass by your land in peace. It means if you have trouble with bandits or rustlers, you need only signal us." Sarah struggled to her feet again, swaying slightly. "And what do you expect from us in return?" Standing Bear's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. "Respect, fair trading when our paths cross, and—" He paused, looking at Ayana. "The boy has no family now. His grandmother lives with our band, but she is old. He will need guidance as he grows." The implication was clear. Ayana would remain with his people, but Sarah had become something like a godmother to him, a connection between 2 worlds. "We would be honored," Sarah said immediately, and Tom nodded his agreement. As the morning progressed, the scene took on an almost dreamlike quality. Comanche warriors worked alongside Tom's vaqueros to repair damage from the battle. Standing Bear proved to be a skilled healer, properly cleaning and binding Sarah's wound, while explaining that the bullet had passed through cleanly without hitting bone. Ayana stayed close to Sarah, chattering in a mixture of Comanche and broken English about his ordeal. Through his stories, a fuller picture emerged of the massacre at Yellow Creek, families killed for their land and possessions, with the crime planned to look like an Indian raid. Only Ayana's escape had prevented the perfect cover-up. "Justice has been served," Standing Bear said grimly as his warriors finished their grim cleanup. "These men will trouble no more families." As the sun climbed higher, preparation began for the Comanche band's departure. But first there was a ceremony. Standing Bear called his warriors into a circle around Sarah and Tom. Ayana was brought forward, and the chief began speaking in Comanche, his voice carrying the weight of ancient tradition. "He's adopting you into the tribe," Diego whispered to Sarah, his eyes wide with amazement. I have never seen such a thing." When the ceremony concluded, Standing Bear presented Sarah with a beautiful necklace of silver and turquoise. "You are now sister to the Quahadi," he said solemnly. "This will be known to all our people." Sarah accepted the honor with tears in her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," Standing Bear replied. "Live with honor. Teach your children to respect all people. This is enough." As the Comanche band prepared to leave, Ayana approached Sarah one final time. In careful English, he said, "I will grow strong. I will remember what you did. Someday I will repay the debt." "There is no debt," Sarah replied, hugging him gently. "Family doesn't keep accounts." Standing Bear mounted his horse and looked down at Tom and Sarah. "The people will not forget this day. Your ranch stands under the protection of the Quahadi. May you prosper in peace." The war party departed as silently as they had arrived, disappearing into the vastness of the Texas prairie like morning mist. Within minutes, only hoofprints and the memory of their presence remained. Tom and Sarah stood together on their bullet-scarred porch, watching the last rider vanish over the horizon. The silence that followed was profound, not the lonely silence Sarah had feared when she first arrived, but the peaceful quiet of two people who truly understood each other for the first time. "I misjudged you," Tom said quietly. "I thought I was getting a wife who needed protection. Instead, I got a partner who can hold her own against any odds." Sarah leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion finally claiming her. "I misjudged myself. I thought I was just running away from a bad situation. But maybe I was running towards something better all along." Tom's arm came around her shoulders carefully, mindful of her wound. "Think you can stand the isolation now? It's likely to be a different kind of loneliness. We'll be famous across the territory after this. Every traveler will want to hear the story of the mail-order bride who fought off 5 bandits and earned Comanche protection." Sarah smiled, feeling truly at peace for the first time since leaving Ohio. "I think I can handle whatever comes next. Besides," she added, touching the turquoise necklace, "we're not really alone anymore, are we?" In the distance, a red-tailed hawk circled high above the prairie, its cry carrying on the morning wind. The Broken Arrow Ranch had become something more than just a place to raise cattle. It had become a bridge between worlds, a symbol that understanding and respect could triumph over fear and hatred. As they walked back into their bullet-scarred house to begin repairs and recovery, neither Tom nor Sarah looked back toward the horizon. Their future lay ahead, built on foundations of courage, compassion, and the kind of love that grows from mutual respect and shared trials. The mail-order bride had found her new life, and in protecting one wounded child, she had helped heal wounds between peoples that seemed impossible to bridge. In the harsh beauty of the Texas frontier, some stories really did have happy endings.